Hello everybody, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics. Thank you so much for being here. In today's video, we really need to talk about something as it pertains to filtration because this is one of the most misunderstood parts of aquarium filtration. So in today's video, we're not talking about sponge filters or hang on the backs or canisters, but we are talking about the three most important concepts to understand when it comes to aquarium filtration. That is the different types: mechanical filtration, biological filtration, and chemical filtration. Because when we're talking about these types of filtration, it really helps us understand the types of filters we need in our aquarium, if we need any at all. So, first thing, I want to start with the most important type of filtration in your aquarium, and that is the biological filtration. If you get this concept right, the other two aren't nearly as important. Biological filtration is the filter's ability to house beneficial bacteria that will allow them to accomplish the nitrification process. In other words, making sure your tank is cycled. It houses those beneficial bacteria that allows the microbes to convert ammonia that's produced by your fish. That ammonia gets converted by microbes to nitrite. And there are other microbes in your aquarium that will convert the nitrite to nitrate. And then we have live plants, or we have water changes that will remove the nitrate. So when it comes to biological filtration, that is the most important thing that your filters can do. And keep in mind, you don't necessarily need a filter to accomplish this process because there are microbes that attach to all the surfaces that have sufficient amounts of oxygen in your aquarium. That's your rocks, your wood, the top parts of your substrate. And so there are plenty of people out there who don't run any filters at all, and yet they still have biological filtration because your entire ecosystem can serve as a biological filter. Now, if you have tanks that are more heavily stocked, then a actual filter like maybe a hang-on back like you see here, or some sponge filters or a canister filter, those may be more important because you want a lot more surface area for your beneficial bacteria to accomplish the nitrification process. So as an example, we have our 75-gallon Mbuna tank here in the gallery. Well, that's a pretty heavily stocked aquarium. And if I just took all the filters out, those fish would absolutely struggle for oxygen, and they would struggle just because it's a lot of bioload and probably not enough surface area to support them long term. And so we have a canister filter in that tank. The tank behind me, the 50-gallon lowboy, heavily planted tank, there's lightly stocked right now. I have a canister filter in there, but I know I could pull that canister filter out of there and have no filter running at all, and that tank would be just fine. So biological filtration is hugely important, and it's going to really depend upon the stocking levels of your aquarium. I have always said, and I will continue to maintain, that when it comes to biological filtration, we have way more biological filtration capacity in just about any filter you would buy for just about any setup. And what do I mean by that? In the fish room, we have a lot of quarantine tanks, and there are times when those quarantine tanks are stocked with hundreds of fish in, like, let's say a 20-gallon, usually Tetra, something small, Rasboras. And we might just have one small sponge filter in that tank, and yet there's no ammonia spike. There's no nitrite spike. Why? Because that one sponge filter houses way more surface area and way more beneficial bacteria than we would ever need. And so biological filtration is really easy to accomplish provided the microbes are in the tank at sufficient quantities. All right, the next type of filtration, I actually think this is the second most important, and that is the mechanical filtration. And I think here's where the debate really gets into whether or not you need a filter at all. I have seen a lot of filterless tanks, and in my opinion, a lot of those filterless tanks don't actually look all that good. The water is not necessarily the clearest. It doesn't mean the water is unhealthy, right? Again, the biological side, that is really has to do with the ultimate health of your fish, not having ammonia or nitrite. But when it comes to mechanical filtration, if you want a clear looking tank, you don't want a bunch of stuff floating around the water. If a fish swims by and it stirs up some stuff on the surface, on the substrate, and that gets in the water column, really you do want your filters to be able to suck that up. Now, when it comes to mechanical filtration, canister filters are absolutely awesome. Sumps can be pretty darn good. A lot of your hang-on back filters are very strong candidates for mechanical filtration, pulling stuff out of the water column. Sponge filters, matin filters, box filters are pretty bad at it. Not that they can't accomplish it. Again, the vast majority of filters that we run in the fish room, sponge filters. And they do a pretty darn good job, provided that they are properly maintained. And so when it comes to mechanical filtration, yes, a lot of it has to do with the amount of water flow you have going through the aquarium, but also the filter media that you have within the filter. And so in the canister filters behind me in the gallery, we have a lot of sponge. We have a lot of filter floss in those, and they are their design. They're there to capture all that stuff that would normally be floating around in the water column, gets trapped up in the filter media, makes the tank appear clearer. And so when it comes to mechanical filtration, a lot of it is, what do you want your tanks to look like? Again, if you really, 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 like we did for the gallery, we wanted tanks to look very clear. The canister filters for us was a no-brainer. The third type of filtration is chemical filtration, and I think by far this is the least important. So we're looking at things like activated carbon and purigen and this media that will pull chemicals out of the water column. Now, again, for us, we have Chicago tap water. There's really not a lot of chemicals in the water. We use dechlorinator to get everything out when we're doing water changes. And so I really don't have a need for activated carbon or purigen. It does have a use case, and that is if you do have, let's say, well water and you've got some metals in there, that can be of use, or if you recently medicated a tank and you want to get those medications out of the water column, there could be a base case for that as well. But for the most part, the media is, the chemical media is probably going to be your most expensive addition to your aquarium filtration, way more expensive than using sponge or using filter floss. If you want to hear how to save money on that, check out that video in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below. But when it comes to chemical filtration, you are a little bit more limited in the types of filters you can use. And so sponge filters, matten filters, not really great. For the most part, there's not really an opportunity to add the chemical filtration. You could certainly do it in a box filter in a limited capacity. When you have a hang-on back filter, it's possible to add it there. And certainly a canister filter or a sump, it is very easy to add it there. But again, it's just not something we often use, or really haven't used it in well over a decade, if not longer. So what does that mean, practically speaking? Prioritize your biological filtration, which is really easy to do. Like I said, for the most part, any filter type on any size tank is probably going to get you where you need to be. In fact, these 125s that I have right behind me, the 125 Geophagus tank over here is fairly heavily stocked. I would have no problems putting a fully cycled single sponge filter in that tank, and I know I would not get any ammonia or any nitrite spikes, even without the plants. Again, the reason why we have canister filters in there is the mechanical filtration. And so if you want your tank to appear clear, if you don't want a lot of stuff building up on your surface, on your substrate, where fish are swimming by and stuff is shooting off into the water column, then often having a hang-on back filter or a canister filter there to pull the stuff out of the water column, trap it in your filter media, that's going to go a long way. Just keep in mind, if you don't properly clean your filter media, well, then your tank's not going to look that good, because once your filter media gets saturated with detritus, it just can't trap anymore. So those are the three types of filtration. If you want to learn a lot more about aquarium filters, check out that video in the upper right-hand corner. Again, if you want to learn how to save money on filter media, check out the video in the lower right-hand corner. As always, appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week.